I'm back. Oh, what have we got today? Oh, it's one of them Helix things. Now then, I originally looked at the Helix 4 unit. It was probably 5 years ago when they first came out, and I did a really in-depth inside and out review, and it's still on there now on my channel if you've got a few hours spare, because it literally is a huge review. Now I remember doing that review and playing the guitar in the studio. I played if I remember right, it was like a blue Telecaster, Fender Telecaster style guitar. One that I'd made from parts, Warmoth parts and things like that, and it had this incredible sound on a track I played at the end of that review. You might want to watch that. There's probably a link down below in the text, you know, so you can go and watch that. It's really worth looking at. Now at the time, I did give the Helix a very, very high score, and the whole thing had been apart. I looked at all the processors and all the rest, and in comparison to, well, the Fractal audio of the time, it was substantially cheaper and absolutely no worse. In fact, it was easier to use, and that was a major advantage. So why aren't I using that now? Why didn't I keep it? I sold it. Well, for me, the answer is very simple. It was a very big unit, and it's still a big unit today, as it would be. And, you know, I come from using rack gear. You know what that stuff is. And so I sold it. I didn't have the real estate in the studio to have such a big unit lying around. I think that makes sense. And at the time, I'd invested in that unit, so I saw this thing come out, the Helix Rack, which is basically identical, except that you've got a separate, smaller floor controller. And you know, I really did consider it, but it was expensive. It still is expensive, relatively speaking. But I'll get to pricing later. I saved a fair bit of money on this one through a deal. Not with the manufacturer, and I did have to pay for this one, by the way. That and that, both out of my pocket. So I don't get anything for free. So Tony, what's the plan? What are you playing at? Why have you bought a Helix Rack and a Helix floor pedal? Well, it's simple. It's 5 years on, at least, since I looked at it last time. Now, when I did look at it last time, I thought there were some great sounds in it, but there was a lot of stuff that was not so great. And that's always been the case historically with these type of units, whether you talk of Kemper, whether you talk of the Helix from Line6, or whether you talk about the FX. Yeah, any of them, they all have sort of similar problems, some more than others. But I'm cleverer than just writing everything off and saying, oh, it's all rubbish, which is what some people do. And after 5 years, I know that this product will have changed quite dramatically from how it was on its first revision of firmware when I looked at it all them years ago. And here it is. So I decided to say, well, I've got a rack. You can see a picture on the screen now. That's an old rack. And it's got some interesting gear in it, which we're going to swap out and fit this in and do all our other changes. And you'll see how we go about updating everything and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's about time. But in this review, this is the one that matters, this is the one we're looking at. I shall be looking at the Helix inside and out, as I always do. I shall take a quick look at the pedal. I'm not sure I'll strip all that down, but I might, who knows. And you know, we'll run through the software and the operating system and try and highlight some of the ways that it's changed, and it has changed. If I can remember what wasn't there in the other version. It's a long time ago. Okay, well, what's the plan? Well, the plan is we'll take a look at the Helix Rack itself first. That's inside and out, and I'll have a quick look, see if I can see any processors and things, but there's only a limit to how far I'm going to go with that. bearing in mind I did it on the 4 unit. Then we'll take a quick look, actually we'll look at the front and the back of that unit, that rack. We'll take a quick look at this, we'll move on to the programs, give a bit general overview. I don't want this video to be 10 hours long. How we fit it in the rack and how we use other equipment to integrate, and then how we integrate this, maybe with an amp and things like that. Because I still have amps and I'm not always convinced about the, these simulations. Okay, well, here we are closer, and it's a simple matter to remove a few screws and take a look inside. So let's do that. And immediately you might say to yourself, well, what do I get for my money? There doesn't look much in there. Let's see if we can swivel this around a little bit. There you go. Well, it doesn't look like you get much for your money, does it? We've got an I/O board here, actually, but the I/O board's actually hiding. It's hiding all the good stuff down there. I can see the board underneath, so I might just screw this one off and lift it out of the way so we can see the main processing board. Let me go and take a look at that. Let's see what we can do. And there it is, the main board. Doesn't look much, does it? Well, I don't know about that. I think it is much, and it's pretty much like it was on the original 4 unit about 5 years ago. You can see here there's 2 Shark processors. That's what they call them because it says Shark on them. Yeah, not much more to say about them. It's all on the original video, and I'll put a link below so you can go and learn a bit more about that board and the chips that are on it. But I did want to show you that it's still there. It don't look like you get much for your money, does it really? But actually I suppose you do. Our friends over at Fractal Audio, well, they might be your friends, they're not really mine, were harping on about how expensive the Shark chips were back in the day. But basically they were, well, not quite telling the truth, I don't think. But there you go. You can see the quality of this is absolutely first class. And by the way, that is just lying across the board and connects elsewhere. So there it is, all very nice. Yeah, nothing to really criticise. Like the main board, you know, these backup boards like this one here that you see there, they're all made on a machine. Line6 is very well known for its quality, and I'll show you around a few other little niceties while we're here. I think it's not really that much else to talk about that because I have covered it before. Well, I always take a look at other things, and one of the other things, as we call it, is the power supply, the internal power supply. Now, once again, this is not really that different than the Fractal Audio one, which was, well, not that great and not that bad, I suppose, in its own little way. This one's very much similar. This one's made by CUI Incorporated, wherever they may be, probably China. I suspect they are. But there it is. What's it cost? You probably buy them for $8 or $10. That's about the value of that. Or less than the quantities that this company buy. It is a switch mode power supply, by the way, and what that really means is that you can have 100 to 240 volts on the input side. So you could buy, basically you could buy this Helix Rack from anywhere and plug it into your wall outlet. Now, taking a closer look at the top backboard, we took a quick look at the bottom one, but I might have another look at that. You can see that a lot of these connectors, well, in fact, all of the connectors are mounted on that board. So if you do get damaged connectors, you might have to do some reworking on that board, if you can get the connectors, or something similar at least. I never really like to see that like that, because, like I said, if you do get damaged connectors, well, you're damaging the unit, aren't you, rather than just pushing out a tiny little board. This thing's huge. Well, I don't think I will report back. I'll show you. That's a much better plan. Well, here it is. You can see it's completely surface mount technology. Yeah, all these little capacitors that you see around, really cheap they are. They're just pence to buy. or cents to buy, depending on which currency, but there you go. So there is some stuff on this board, and that makes things worse for these connectors, because, well, damage a connector in a big way and then damage the board in a big way, and then you're buying a new board if you can get one. But looking at the other I/O board below, you can see it there. Again, it's really well made, there's no doubt about that. But what it is, it's got all these connections along the back, just like the top board, and yeah, damage any of them, you could be in trouble. Fortunately, in a Helix rack, usually this thing sits in a rack and it's out the way, so you don't really get much damage to these connectors. But if you was to buy one of them other units out there and you know, not having in a rack, which a lot of people don't do, well, you could end up with trouble. And I know on the likes of the Fractal Audio unit, they had other boards in a very similar manner to this, where, you know, the I/O's mounted on the main PCB, and that could be very expensive. Anyway, we're talking about this unit, and yeah, similarly bad. By the way, the date code on this one, I'm not sure if you can see it from there, it's just there. So it's week 11, 2020. Yeah, pretty new. So if you do want to see the current version, this is the machine. It's not been here for very long, has it? Just before we do move on, I do want to show you this little area down here. Now this section here with this separate PCB is that main joystick on the front that we use for selecting basically everything. Now this is my second unit. I hadn't mentioned that before, but the first unit that came was sealed and brand new, but this joystick had a fault on it, and if you pushed it to the right it'd go yeah, something like that. So it had to go back, and that took a number of weeks to get changed. They did change it, but just a bit awkward and difficult. Especially, I questioned, how come, you know, you've got a brand new unit like that with a fault like that? Where's the QC? Well, I don't know where the QC was, but that unit had come from the factory in that condition. It hadn't been knocked or anything like that. That's how it came out. So the QC control, the quality control, I was a little bit concerned about. You'll notice also down here, down in this area, this is like a controller where the phone's volume is, and down below it is for headphones out. So you've got, it's probably got a little amplifier on there or something like that, or maybe not, but I think so, because there's nothing else on the board. It's just very sparse, really. Yeah, very interesting. Moving along a bit, you've got a typical chip that drives the display, which is just the other side over there. Not much more to say about that front. You can just see a little board down there, which is where the input is. Down there. This here is your on and off. And this has got stuff all around it, pretty much like I've seen on the Fractal Audio one, except that this is more silicone based. Yeah, I've seen that on 1 or 2 amps these days as well, and I don't think it's a very good move. Personally, I would have thought that yeah, they'd make the switches so they don't push out. Okay, well, here we are around the back, and yeah, I just want to run along this and show you what's on the back of the Helix rack, rather than you know, what was in the previous review I did of the floor pedal. You compare the difference. I think there is a few little differences, but I haven't been back to the 4 unit for a while. So let's get down to it. This augs in here, this is not any old augs in. You connect a secondary active pickup equipped guitar or bass here. Active pickup, note. And the reason is it's 10 kilo ohms in that socket there. Next we've got a very common looking XLR. They can handle 48 volts as well, by the way, so if you've got a microphone that needs that, yeah, you can put it in here and have your 48 volts on it, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, Now on the Helix Rack we've actually got 4 send and returns, which I think is pretty cool. Now you can use them in the normal way, of course, stick pedals on them and stuff like that, but you can also use them for connecting other things as well. So the inputs can be used and the outputs can be used, you know, to loop in some other device, which is pretty good. I like that. This four send and returns is cool. Moving along a bit, we've got this ground lift, which relates to these XLR outputs. Now you can use these basically for, well, what you would use them for, off into the house mixer, the PA, FR, and so on and so forth. But what you mustn't do is connect these up anywhere where there's a 48 volt supply on the other end. Otherwise you could fry this unit. Yeah, that's something to be really careful about. Now these others here, these 1/4 inch outs, are just really basically replications of what you can do with them, but if you've got 1/4 inch you know, connectors. How hard does it have to be? And lastly, this output here, this has got basically the guitar signal on it, so you could feed this out to something else that needs a guitar signal. Now I did talk about the power input, and the power input can handle 100 to 240 volts, so it'll auto switch. It's a switch mode power supply as we saw earlier, and there it is. We've got all the legislation down there as well, and I know that Line6 is always pretty perfect with that. Well, they would be. It's basically Yamaha, isn't it? Now, as you saw earlier, I use expression pedals basically in the studio, and the control has got these replicated on them anyway. But here we are, expression 1, 2 and 3, and we've also got this expression toe switch, which if you're using the right pedal you can switch things in and out that way. But you can control loads of stuff, whether it's volume, whether it's some effects or distortion or whatever. It's all programmable. Very nice. Now this little this little external amp tip ring thing here, so if you put a stereo connector on it you can control 2 things. We could switch the amp with that. Unfortunately for a Road King 2, which I have, that's not enough. So that's a pain in the... And this one here, I've never really had much of a use for this, but this is called a CV out, or a control voltage out. You can use it on synths and different things like that, but as I said, I've never used it myself, so could I tell you about it? Not really. I don't really care either, do you? Now we have got a MIDI in and a MIDI out, or through, or and through, call it what you like. Yeah, very useful when you're in a rack, of course, although some of the gear I've got doesn't even have MIDI, as I said. Bit of a pain. But then again, a lot of it does have it, and yeah, I always like to see that, and yeah, it can be very, very, very useful indeed. Now this little point here, this is where you connect your control floor pedal, and the system does come with a cable of sorts, but more about that later. That's where you connect it. Now if you've never heard of a Variax, I don't know whether you have, but that's where you're going to be connecting it, in there. I don't own one, I've never owned one, I probably never will. But a Variax is basically, think of it like an electronic sort of guitar that connects in there, that can control this in wonderful ways, if you like, that sort of thing. Now moving along to the next item, we've got a word clock here. This is usually used for keeping timings correct on your system. If you've got other devices, and you can have a master or a slave, which I'm told you can't use anymore. It's crazy. But the fact is, that's what it's for, and you can terminate it on or off here with this little switch. All simple, really. Next up, we've got what I call a SPDIF, in and out. And that's like a digital connection, and they're basically stereo. It's all exciting. A lot of people do use SPDIF. Next along, we've got AES EBU in and out, and I must say I don't use this stuff. Obviously you can use it in a studio, you can use it in a lot of uses. it's a digital connection basically, and yeah, it used to be very common. It maybe still is for some people, but it isn't for me. Yeah, I'd connect in other ways, like these. Yeah. And on the next little bit, we've got a USB port here that'll work on USB 2 or on USB 3. And you can actually stream with this, so all good stuff. It's 24-bit 96 kilohertz. Yeah, so it's as high as it gets. The thing's supported by Apple and Windows, and yeah, all good. Don't use an external USB hub, it can give you problems. The L6 link, by the way, is also used for basically connecting a lot of Helix equipment. Yeah, Helix can use the Line6 stage source monitors and or DT series amplifiers, and yeah, there's your connection. Now for now I've just put the Helix control up the top here so you can see the connections on the back of that. I hope you really don't mind. Of course you don't. We've got the power switch, the on and off for the Helix controller here. Cable wrap here. We've got a DC in, which is 9 volts, 3 amp. And if you're not using the host cable connector, then you'll probably need that. But if you're using this, the Helix Rack will power this, which is all very nice. Yeah, what more can you ask for? Moving along a bit, you've got a USB connection. Now this is not a USB connection like you and I would use it. This is for, it's line 6A for future use. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means you don't use it. And lastly along here is our favourite expression pedal 1, 2 and 3, and the expression toe switch there, just as it was on the rack itself. And that covers the Helix control bit for now. Notice when I installed the Helix control that it started to update the control, telling me that the firmware was out of date. It's all completely automatic except for OK. Oh, and by the way, it didn't have to be connected to the internet to do that. It just did it. Okay, well, let's take a look at the front. Obviously, we've got this main colour display, which is one of the main features on the whole thing. We've got the on and off switch. Well, how hard's that? Well, it isn't, is it? You turn it on and away you go. And of course, we've got the guitar in, and that can be set up to either high impedance or otherwise, which is or could be useful. There's also a switchable pad on this. You know, if you've got pickups that have got real high gain, or even active pickups, you could throw a pad in the front there. That'd help you a bit. Now, I'm not going to spend all day on this. I'm just going to tell you what these do, and we'll come back to actually all the HX edit work in another video. Actually, it'll be the following on video from this one. Okay, this knob here is a sort of preset choosing button. As you can see, we get different presets when we turn it. How hard does that have to be? And of course, with the save button, once we've made any changes, we can save the preset. You can also dig further into the sort of control. This is like global settings, global EQ, command center, controller assignment, bypass assignment, and so on and so forth. Anytime you want to get out of this, all you do is just hit that. Okay, let's imagine we are somewhere else on this unit and looking at other things on these down the bottom here. There they are, a few of them. If I wanted to get to the tone stack really quick, all you need to do is to press this one, and this will whip the tone stack back so you can control it with these knobs here. Now we've got here one of the main controls of the Helix Rack, in fact of the Helix as well. It does so many things. It's like a joystick. You can turn it, but you can also flip sideways. And as you see, we move sideways. These blocks are chosen accordingly. If you can just, well, you can't see them, they're off screen. Well, I wouldn't worry. Take my word for it. Okay, you've got a little button up here called Action. No, not Action Man. No, you remember him. Let's press it. What you get is a load of stuff across the bottom here. and we can move left and right if there is any, which there isn't in this case. But there's 1,000 things we can do. We can press these buttons and choose one of these various options, and these are, for example, copy block, clear all blocks, so on and so forth. A lot to do with editing, and if you press it, you're back to where you were. And one last thing on this action thing, it depends what screen you're in. If we were, for example, in a global action screen, which you'll see in my other video, this action button will show you different things. It's relative to what you're doing, and that matters. Bear that in mind, won't you? Now, one thing, if you've got one of these blocks that's got more than one page of parameters, you'll see little dots on the screen, and when you see that, you can use these page to scroll to the other parameters. Now, we have talked about these 6 knobs down the front here. They are variable dependent on where you are and what you're doing, and as you can see, if I just move around this, we can see different parameters, but you can basically just grab it and turn the drive up or down, or whatever's on the parameter that you've chosen. And you can see up here, you see a little E, a small E, that says it's been edited, but I wouldn't really worry. No, it hasn't. Now, if you wanted to assign, let's imagine you wanted to assign the drive to a controller. What you can do is just take the button and hold it down, and you can learn the controller from there, you know, apply it to a particular controller. Really easy to use. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to, but you get the idea. Now, moving along a bit further, we've got a main volume out there. You can see it. And of course, we've got a phone's volume out and a little connector down the bottom there where you put your phones. All very nice. By the way, we've got this this tap tempo button if you want to do that, so you can quickly tap in a different tempo than faffing around scribbling and things, you know. And one thing just to mention, those phones, they're 12 ohms out, so you're going to get some volume on there unless you put some big fat studio phones on that are really not matched impedance, and you can get that sometimes if you use the cheap nasty things. They'll be fine. The truth is, if you use cheap phones on here, you're going to get some distortion because they can drive. These can actually drive high impedance phones. I was making things up. So using low quality, low impedance headphones can often result in distortion. So you'd have to back off a bit, I'm afraid. Okay, here's a quick shot of the controller. And don't worry if these are light or dark for now, they just haven't been set up yet. I've got to get to that. So don't worry too much. This looks a bit dark, but it's all adjustable. This is the main 20 character LCD display. This has got the preset number and name, and you press and hold a foot switch, push it as 12 to engage and the tuner display. Yeah, it's got a tuner. No, not a tuner, a tuner. Let me do that. Well, you can't see it much yet, but trust me, it's in there. Very nice scribble strips. Say that when you're drunk. And you can rename these to whatever you fancy and stuff like that. You can have multiple modes on it as well and things like that, but we'll get that in the next video. Now, you can set this up into what they call stomp foot switch mode. Now, when you're in that mode, these buttons become slightly different. Basically, depends how you touch them, because it's sort of touch sensitive when you're in that mode. When you're in the stomp foot switch mode, if you touch them but don't press them, foot switch, any of these foot switches, for 2 seconds, you assign that switch to the selected block on the screen. Well, you can't see the block on the screen right now, but just trust me, it assigns it. There's another shortcut. When you're in the stomp foot switch mode, if you touch and hold but don't press 2 switches, you can swap the assignments between them, including any custom scribble strip names or LED colours. Yeah. And there's a third shortcut. Again, touch but don't press, tap to briefly display the tempo panel. This lets you quickly fine-tune the current tempo without navigating to the global settings / MIDI tempo menu. Well, it's designed to keep it quick. And if you see that down there, if we just do a quick tap, you can see it's running at 120. It's switched back. See that? Well, here I am back up top. There's so much to actually look at in these two units thrown together. I could literally be all day. I'm not going to be. Might probably be a week. The thing is, if you don't step back from it a little bit, it can be very daunting and you sort of wonder where to start. Well, if you want to know where to start, there's a guy actually on YouTube called, I think his name is Jason Sadites. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure. But if you search for him, his information will probably be on screen somewhere. Yeah, Jason Sadites. What I like about him, he starts off on, video 1 and goes through about, I don't know, 100 or more, or many more. But the great thing about him is, he's that focused on it. I'll never be like that. I don't want to be either. What I want to do is plug in and play. I don't want to be a computer technician. I've been one of them. I don't want to be some software expert. Do you? Oh, you do? Well, why you got an Axe FX3? That'll keep you busy for months. You'll never plug in again. Oh my God. Anyway, what I want to do is get back to this a little bit and show you some of the things that are on the hardware or in the software, or you get the idea. We don't want to be here forever. Okay, well, just before we move on, I decided to get the rack and put all the stuff in it and all the rest of it. This is the last little excerpt of this little section. So we'll be coming back to how the software all works in another video. But on this video, I'm going to concentrate on the hardware really, and getting it in the rack and showing you what I do and what I had before, which is actually quite important because the old rack worked wonderfully well. Why am I upgrading? Well, because it's time, and I can. That's the reason. But just before we move on to that section, this is the last, as I said, the last comment on this. Don't waste your time going and buy those expensive Mission pedals to control this unit, because actually, as I've shown before, you can buy these Nectar ones. I think they're about £23 in the UK. There won't be much difference wherever you are, and they work absolutely perfectly. Let me zoom in and show you. Okay, well, here we go. Take a look at this here, this drive, and as I move the Nectar pedal, there it is going from 10 and back to 0. That's the pedal. You've probably seen them around. Nectar, you can see that. Just search it on the internet. You've got a couple of settings down here, if you can see them, and an adjuster on the side and all that sort of stuff. It's all good, and they're about £23, which makes them very good, because you can have 3 or 4 for the price, half the price of the Mission one. But there's the thing you need to do with it, and what you need to do is to zoom down here, go to Controller Assignments, and you can assign it by hitting this Learn Controller and have this on Expression Pedal 1, which is where I've got it plugged. I'm not going to do it now, but it's that easy. And when you do that, you'll find that when you toe forward, it will go to 0, and when you toe back, it will go to 10. So what you do need to do is to go into Global Settings, to this one here, Expression Pedal, and flip it to inverted. It is normal by default, but if you flip it to inverted, it works wonderfully well. What more can I say about that? There's one last look of it working. Yeah, works brilliant. Well, here we are in the next section of the video, and it's all about this rack, and I've had this rack a while. You might have seen it if you watched a lot of my videos and stuff like that, but it goes back a long way, this rack does, and from the days when I even had a tri-axis from Mesa Boogie and a 290. Yes, that far back. 90s. But I decided I was going to take it and get it a bit more up to date, you know what I mean. Not because I have to, but because I should, really. Take a look at this and you'll see there's a few units in here that are pretty interesting units, and hey Tony, why have you got them in there? Well, let me run through them. I've got a Samsung PowerBright PB10, which stops me getting killed. I think that's pretty useful. But you can also pull these out. They're not the best things in the world, but you can pull these out and they'll light up the rack if you're at a gig. I like that sort of thing, don't you? I can also turn the whole rig on and off just with one switch, like that. And I've got a 230 volt output here for this Samsung. It's all good. I even got a dimmer for the lights, 10 amp switch, resettable. Well, 10 amp fuse really, resettable. And you just push it in to reset it. All good. Round the back, you'll get to see that in a minute. But that's the first item. The next item is interesting too. Well, here you go. It's all interesting, this one. This is a Tascam. What's its model? It's an SSR200. And what's great about that unit is you can put your little software gizmos. This one's a USB. This one is a USB 3, 32 gig. So you can put a load of tracks on there. Backing tracks if you want. Anything you want. But you can put tracks on. And if you don't like it on that format, you've got two more formats in here, which is nice. In fact, it's very nice. You can also record, yeah, over there, which can be interesting or could be useful, but it only records into stereo, so remember that. I like it in the rack and it's staying in, I can tell you that. Next I've got a blank space. Yeah, reminds me of the wife. No, I'm joking, of course. What? Yeah, I am. Now moving down a bit further to this silver thing here. Oh my god, I go back a long way with these. This is a TC Electronic G Major 2 and there was a G Major 1. And I had one. In fact, I had the G Major 1 when it first came out, so you can imagine how long ago that is. Go and Google it. Google, what a funny word. Go and Google it and you'll see how old the G Major 1 is. It's nearly as old as me. But don't let that put you off. It's actually, even the G Major 1 was a pretty good little unit. It was low cost. G Major 2 is also low cost, but it did include a Univibe, which I wanted among other things. So the G Major 1 actually made me buy the G Major 2 because, see these little buttons on the front? Well, mine fell off. It's crazy, but that's what happened. They fell off. I couldn't have really gone back to warranty. They were probably, I don't know, 8 years old when I had that happen, or 10 years old. Something ridiculous. Now remember, this stuff's coming out. Or some of it is. Maybe, yeah, we'll see. Now these last two units I'm going to cover go back a real long way. Back, like I said, to the tri-axis and all that sort of stuff. I had a stereo rig, you know, multi-speakers and tri-axis, and you get the idea. Yeah, so the first thing I ever bought was this bottom one, this thing here called a ground control GCX. And what it is, it's made by Voodoo Lab. They changed the name, I believe, to Voodoo Lab. Same basic company. And if you go digging on their site, you'll find the GCX. In fact, you'll still find this GCX for sale. It's a really, really useful unit. And it can be programmed and controlled through MIDI. But if you look down here, you can see there's a 128, not 128, 128, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And think of those as like switches that can be open or closed. And you can route audio, or you can route an on and an off, and all sorts of other things through it. And control it with MIDI, which is important. And it used to have a great big ground control Pro pedal, which I did have twice in my time, but not now. In any case, I have a smaller controller, but that's going to go as well because we've got the Helix controller to use everything. So, very useful thing. It's got feed-throughs into the back, so you can take the feed to other things. Loads of things. Let's not worry about it for now. But a very flexible unit, and you can have up to 4 of them, so that's up to 32 of these. I'll call them loops for now. Very, very powerful. In fact, some of the biggest bands in the world use GCX switches. Yeah, guitar audio switcher, it's a proper term. Well, this is called a System Mix Plus, and it does what it says on the tin. It's a system mix. And we've got a left and a right balanced out, and that was one of the reasons I bought this, because you could take these two and run them off to the desk. So simply, just plug them in and you're in business. And you've got all this other stuff at the same time if you didn't really want to have oodles of everything else. You've got a cabinet simulator built in. You've also got this balanced out with the phase and ground changes, as I said, and we can set up 2 mixes here. Won't bore you too much with it. Like I said, there's a MIDI feed, so you can feed in and out the back again. And these two working together were really the dogs. And you, as I said, you could have 4 GCXs. It was an awesome setup where you could switch anything in the entire rig with one button press. And I'm talking in the 90s here, remember that. Looking at the Helix just behind here and its controller, you think that the Helix does a load more things regarding control. It doesn't. It doesn't actually do, in my opinion, really anything more than these two did. Maybe there's a few extra bits, but that unit, that Helix, has got a few less bits as well as extra bits, if you get me. So each setup is slightly different in its own way. But of course these are getting on, so they're going to be coming out. Now listen, I don't know what you can see in there, but I have bought a torch, and that's one of the things you do need in the back if you go to a gig. It's always useful. You can just turn it on like this. Now we can see everything. What about that? You're not going to see that much, but you'll get the idea. It's riddled in cables, and I mean riddled in cables. I've got some on the throne on the top that were going off to the amp and things like that. And I've got things like AC adapters in there. I've got loads and loads of cables that were connected to other equipment. Yeah, I won't bore you too much with it really, except to say that when you do that, it's all a bit of a nightmare, and hopefully the Helix and the rest of it will make it all a bit easier. And that always helps. A nice simple rig. I even have a controller for the Tascam, so you could start and stop. If you wanted to use backing tracks, for example, you can start and stop them from the end of this wire. Now, in its day it wasn't really good enough to have wireless, but there it is, and you can even record from this thing here. Hit it and away you go. Also interesting stuff. Okay, well I'm going to rip everything out. Not rip everything off, no, it's not one of those sort of, not one of them sort of videos. You're on the wrong channel. Yeah, you want to go to some of them fake reviewers, they strip off. Not. So I'm going to rip all this stuff out, and yeah, we'll take a look at what's going to go in. It's all easy to fit and all the rest of it, and I know that other people have done that, but they haven't sort of done it like I have they? No, certainly not. And by the way, one of the things that you always have when you do racks is cables, and this is my collection of cables, and I can show you one of them. Let's do it the easy way. One of my link cables was actually this long. Yeah, that's about 18 inches long, which is way too long really for a rack. But in them days, well, you learn as you go, don't you? But I never bothered to change them. These were high quality connectors, but rather long. And they introduce noise, so that's something that you might not want to use. Something that's got really long cables. Yeah, so these will be the type that's going to go in, and those others are the type that's going to come out, unless I haven't got enough cables. Got got a bag of these things. If you get cables that are all the same colour, these little things here are worth having. I don't know if you can see one of them. But it's got like a little tag on the end that you can write on. And it's one of those, you know, tie wraps. The little indicator on the end what it is. And you can write on there exactly what each cable is. Because when you're in the background there, mark my words, it can be noisy. And I don't mean electrically noisy, I mean, oh my God, what's all this? So a pack of those costs about £2 or $3 to you. And yeah, brilliant. Bear it in mind, won't you? Oops. By the time I'd fitted that and I could see what gaps were left, this has got to come out, I'm afraid. So out it comes and we'll carry on. Well, that's better. Made room for my trusty Tascam SSR 200. Can't be without that, can we? Oh my God, there's not much left, is there? I've only got enough for one more unit, in effect. So there's only one choice, isn't there? That choice is right here. A relay, Line6 Relay G90 digital wireless guitar system. Yeah, and it's going to go right in there because I just felt like doing it. Why not? Let's take a quick look at the G90 rack unit. All looks good to me. This Line6 stuff's not bad actually. Would I say it's perfect? Well, no, I wouldn't. I'd say it's not bad. When I can get into it. There we go. Now, as you'll know, this is a wireless unit. And it can handle a few things, different channels and all sorts of different things. It's got a couple of antennas as opposed to one, and it can fight off the interference and all the other sort of goodies that they should be able to do today. But this is not a new device. This has been around a while, a few years, I dare say. But when I went out to have a look for what you paid and what you got, to be honest, it's a really good bit of gear in comparison to the. I'm just looking if there's a serial and I can't see any. Oh, there is a serial, but there's no date. What a letdown. But it's got all the usual things, all the CE approvals and all the rest of it. So for my money, that's one of the nicer units. I could take the lid off, but I don't think I'll bother. I know it's well made. I just know it is, because I've been inside everything else that Line6 make. Never had a duff piece yet. So I'm going to go and fit that now, and then we can get on with it. And one last thing, just as we're doing this, always remember to fit those little rubber or plastic washers around the screws so they don't cock up. Or your rack gear, or when it's time to sell it, and you will, sooner or later. Look, even I'm selling it all these years later. But you'll want to sell it, and when you do, when it's all screwed up around the edges, nobody will want to buy it because they'll say, oh, that tosser didn't have a clue, did he? Yeah, rubber washers. Or plastic, I think they are sometimes. One of the last things I want to say about this Line6 before we move on. There were a number of other reasons why I chose that one. And I could have chosen others with similar specifications and things, but bearing in mind this is a Line6 and that's a Line6. It sort of fits together nice. But they work at 2.4 gigahertz. So 2.4 gigahertz digital wireless system. Why that's important is this, that at 2.4 gig you don't need any licenses anywhere in the world, and if you're one of these people that actually goes out on the road, you can take this and no license problem, no interference problem, no law stamping on your neck, none of it, and it'll all just work. And of course the second reason was these two antennas, and it probably works, although I haven't looked in the manual. I'm not that bothered about manuals. More scullery. But it probably uses a thing called diversity reception, which helps it to not pick up other signals. But if it doesn't use diversity reception, don't worry, won't make any difference. This is a pretty good unit. Yeah, so there it is, all screwed together. What do you think? Well, it doesn't work yet, of course. But it's going to, and it's not going to be long before it does. Before it does. Now we're going to flip round to the back and start looking at what we're going to do with it. That's better, isn't it? It all looks good. We've got right at the top the PB10, obsolete, still works. We've got some cables coming off it, which I had in there before. These are for the power on and off. Next down we've got the Line6 wireless, which you've just seen. Next down we've got the Helix, which you've just seen. And at the bottom we've got the Tascam. Yeah, very useful unit. At least it is for me. It might not be for you. And if it isn't, you can use one of them, can't you? Or fit something else, like maybe that TC Electronic or something like that. You could do so many things because the TC Electronic's got other effects that may not even be in a Helix. It's all good. Or you could leave a bit of space down the bottom and use pedals, because you can hook a number of pedals up into this Helix, can't you? I don't know how many people talk about that, but I'm not going to do that because I don't particularly use pedals. That's why I'm fitting this. So let's have a look at where we're going to go with this and have some plan or some idea of where we're going to end up. Otherwise, it could be problematic. So a lot of stuff you could mix in the back of this and you could get yourself in the right tizwas. As I did in 1995 or 96, I think it was, something like that. First thing we can do, fortunately, is we can plug in all these mains connectors. And I've got 1, 2, 3 connections sticking out the back. So guess what? I don't need to go and make any. I can just plug these in and away you go. That is phase number 1 out of the way, all powered, straight away. Yeah, sounds like a good idea, so I'm going to go and do that now. Doing this, one of the things you might want to do, you can see that this particular unit's near the back, right near the back, and it has the mains sticking out. You see that? You can get these angled ones, can't you? And if that was me wanting to move this around, I'd be taking an angled one and then reconnecting accordingly. Because you don't really want it sticking out the back like that. Doesn't matter to me, it's stationary in my studio, but to you it might matter. I just thought I'd mention that. And one other thing I think I'll mention while I'm here, you might not have seen these before, but on the PB10 they have a little light that is capable of shining in the back for all the wires, and you can sit it up there out the way. It sits on a little USB and it's really useful. You get a problem around the back or you want to rewire something and it's pretty dark, that's the little thing to do it with. Just fits on any, I can pull it out, fits on any USB. Little light. They probably improved these days, but that was the one that the PB10 came with all those years ago. There it is, inside the enclosure, which is what you're trying to do. Keep it tidy and neat. It'll matter later on. I know what's gone wrong in England here, but it's really hot today. Yeah. Oh my God. What a mess. So at this point, you might want to consider exactly what you're going to do. Now you could take a look at that and you can see all the points on the back of the Helix and what it does and where it goes and that sort of thing. It's all well and good. Yeah. Or you could sit down and draw exactly what you're going to do, how you're going to wire it. Because that helps you a lot later on when you're going to program it. I'm sure it will. And yeah, we can go from there. There's quite a lot of stuff going on in here, so yeah. I'm going to go and take a look at this, and I'm going to have a look at the rest of the gear and consider how we're going to wire it up. Now I could just plug it in, because I'm not that stupid. Or am I? Or is it like that? I don't know. It's one of them. But I don't think I will just plug it in. No. Might get the manuals out even. They do actually give you some guidance in the Line6 manuals somewhere, if you can be bothered to read through it all, as you do. But it's not rocket science. You've got lots of sensory turns and lots of outs and lots of this and lots of that. Depends what you're doing with it. You could set it up so it goes into your recording studio desk or into your interface that's, well, whatever you fancy really. Or you could just send it off to your guitar amp. I think I'll probably do both, yeah. So I'm going to go and take a look at what we do next. Sounds ridiculous. But I'm doing it for your benefit rather than mine. And I'll show you what I did and why I did it and stuff like that. Because nobody ever does that, do they? None of these reviews, you see, do this stuff to the, you know, with the plan and the idea and the rest of it. It'll be a snap of fingers to you, but it won't be to me. However, if you're a music junkie or a gear junkie, that's the best word phrase, well, you probably would like doing this the same as I do. I could get it wrong. As you can see, there's little resemblance to the real deal from what they provide, and I can tell you it's pretty much the same everywhere in the manuals and everywhere else. I need to have a roadmap of where we're going. Yeah. Create a roadmap. So that's what I did. Oh my God, Tony, where is it? Poof. It's there. There's my roadmap. Laid out in glorious colour. You can see that. It's even got my little keys down here. It's got everything I want on the rack. And I hope you like it. Well, you better like it because it's downloadable from in the text. Yeah. You can have it in a PDF format, or you can have it in a JPG format, or you can even have it in a Photoshop format. Yeah, and then you can change things around for what you're doing. Well, how'd you figure that out? Well, I've never done one of these before, have you? It doesn't really matter whether you have or you haven't. But if you decide to have this sort of roadmap of where you're going to go, trust me, it'll make sense later on, and then you'll have your roadmap for all the time you've got the rack, and you might want that. You saw the condition of my old rack, didn't you? Yeah, so is this correct? Maybe not. I've never actually used a Helix with this other gear. I've got rid of a lot of the other gear, but I want it to do certain things. So what I really want to do is to take you through this, and then we're going to wire it up. Well, I'm going to wire it up as far as I can here. And there are a few problems, by the way, some of which are by design with the Helix Rack, which I found to be absolutely comical. And I'm going to show you what that is. And there is talk of it on the likes of the internet. But to be honest, it's crap. It shouldn't be like it is, and I would expect better from what they call a professional piece of equipment, which it isn't. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is run down this. You've got a picture on the screen. I'm going to run down this from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to talk about what I've done and why I've done it, because I think that matters. So here we go. Right at the top, you've got that Power Bright. Which, like I said before, all it does really is dish out mains. In my case it's 240 volts, in your case it could be 240 volts or 230 or even 120, doesn't really matter. But if you look at it from the left hand side of that rack unit at the top, you'll see it's got its mains in, it's then got this lamp, or you'll see it maybe as a USB connector, but it's actually where a lamp fits. And then we've got these outputs. We've got 3, 6, 7, I think there's 8 on this. There might be more or less on mine because I had to go looking for a bit of, you know, an image. But you'll notice that on each one of the outputs, on the output side, I've drawn them in red and I've run a wire to each mains requirement in the rack. Simple, huh? Yeah, of course it is. If we move down one, we're moving down to the Line6 G90 wireless system. Yeah, and that's a full-size rack. And I chose that one because it's a very commercial rack. And, well, it does what it says on the tin, and it's a particularly nice rack. Now, we could fit other models that are slightly smaller and all that sort of thing. Well, they're not slightly smaller, they're half the size. But I bought this one because I wanted to review this one anyway. So that's the reason it's in there, and I think that makes sense. So remember, I don't always buy things just to look at or just to use. I buy them actually to review as well, and I think you need to consider that. But if you look across the back from the left hand side, you'll see there's a word term, T-E-R-M, and you get a 50 ohm terminal and you stick it on that. And as you move across just past the red mains wire, you'll see another one that says term, and you put a 50 ohm terminator on that as well. Those are included with the unit, by the way, so no faffing around. As far as the antenna connections are concerned there, you can have the antennas on the front of the rack or on the back. I've currently got them on the front, but mine might move to the back. Just depends what mood I'm in, but it's highly likely that they will probably stay on the front. As we move to the right of the Line 6 wireless, you can see that we move across then to tuner stroke aux out. Well, I'm not using that currently. We might come to it at some stage, depends what's going on. The next connector from there is main out. Now the thing is about the main out, that's the only other connector I need on the back of that G90. You see, the problem is, you can see the main out, it's in that sort of yellowy colour. And it says to Helix input on front. And that's exactly where your problem is. The Helix does not have an input on the back for a guitar level signal. At least not a proper one. That connector on the front has certain aspects applied to it that isn't on any of the connectors on the back, so you can plug your radio in the back of the rack into the Helix. Now listen, I've heard guys rambling on about, you shouldn't have bought the G90, you should have bought the half size one. Well listen, if I'd have wanted to buy the half size one, I would have, wouldn't I? Well, I didn't, so there. The problem isn't the Line 6 G90. The problem lies with the Helix Rack only having a guitar input on the front of the unit, which is a right ball ache. Still, not to worry, I'm going to take a special wire, a thin wire, but still a special wire, round through to the front of the rack. I'll show you how it's done presently, and we can overcome that problem. And if ever you don't want to use the radio, you just pull that connector out at the front and stuff your guitar in. That sounds like a plan to me, rather than some excuse where they've stuck the connector on the front only. Not even a pass-through. What a waste of time. Okay, well, let's move down to the Helix itself, and I'm going to start again from the left-hand side and work my way to the right-hand side with the connections that I've got connected. You don't necessarily have to have the same ones. In fact, you probably won't. But I'm setting this up for me. I'm not setting it up for you. So it's, in theory, going to work for what I want it to work for. It may or may not, and I might have to modify some of the things on here, but we'll see. So on the left-hand side of the rack, at the side of the Helix, is a TC Electronic MimiQ, M-I-M-I-Q. And that's a little unit that I saw another guy with one of these, and I bought it a month or two back. I never reviewed it at the time, but I might be doing that later. Don't worry. But the MimiQ allows you to, well, it can give you a sort of pseudo twin guitar, a bit like Thin Lizzy almost, if you get what I mean. And you can have it in or out of circuit and all that sort of stuff. So what I've done with it for now is I've connected it with those green wires, you can see them. On loop 1 there's a send and a return, and the return is coming back to the return of loop 1. But this is a stereo pedal, and I wanted to get it into the stereo domain for when I'm doing recording. So I took the other side, the stereo side out, and brought it back and fed it into the return of loop 2. Will it work? I don't know. I haven't tried to do anything like that before, but we'll find out later, won't we? And if it's wrong, well, I'll modify this diagram until it's right, and then you can download it yourself. So that's the MimiQ in place, in theory coming back as a left and right in stereo. And I've still got 2 loops, number 3 and number 4, which are free. I've got no auxiliary input. I've got an analog input there for a mic, and I've got an auxiliary input that isn't being used. Remember that. And unfortunately you can't set them up exactly quite the same as the guitar input on the front of the Helix. What a mistake. Okay, let's move a bit further along. You've got another bit further to the right that says XLR out. And on the XLR out, you can see 2 purple wires. Now those are coming out of there, out of the left and right, and those will be going off to my recording desk. Yeah, that's where I'll be pulling them out from. So that's what the purple wires will be doing. You won't see them anytime soon, but they will be connecting when it's in the studio. But as well as that, just above the top purple wire, you can see that there's a quarter out left or mono. So the quarter out, that white wire, it won't be white, by the way, none of these will be the right colour when I wire them up, but on the diagram it's a white wire and it says 2 amp in. Well, that can be either to the amp in or to the amp return. Yeah, the loop return. So take your pick where it's going to go to, depending on what you're trying to do. For now I've got it on 2 amp in, but that might change in reality. Okay, well, let's move down a little bit lower. Now it's slightly hard to see, but if you look at the Helix control at the bottom of the screen on the panel, we've got a sort of darkish blue wire coming up that connects to the Helix control on the Helix. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because that's where it should go. So that's the wire and that's where it connects. Moving to the right, we have nothing in the Variax. I've got nothing in the MIDI at the moment, but that might change. Nothing in the Variax. The word clock isn't used either at the moment, but it might. But on the SPDIF, you'll notice I've got a light blue wire coming out of the SPDIF on the Helix and going down to the digital in on the Tascam recorder. Remember, that's just a stereo recorder or playback device. But for me, I need to have that feed from the Helix feeding in to the Tascam. Now, as we carry on to the right, we have the other digital connections, the AES EBU in and the AES EBU out, and I'm not using either of those in particular. But just to the right of that is the USB connector, and that USB connector will be used if I ever get to do that for reamping or recording as well. I could use it for that. So those are all the connections on the Helix for me right now. They could change, and if they do change, I'll update this diagram accordingly and put little notes on it as to why I did that. Well, moving down to the Tascam recorder at the bottom. I think that's an SR200 if I remember. I forget the model of that one, it's not easy to remember. But moving from the left to the right, it's the bottom unit in the rack. We've got 2 inputs that I don't use. That might change later. We've got unbalanced inputs left and right. Again, I don't use them. But then we've got 2 balanced outputs with 2 yellow wires. They're shown as yellow wires and it just says secondary output. Well, that'll be going off to a little mixer I've got in the studio for when I want to practice against some tracks. Yeah, sometimes I'll take a mix without the lead guitar and practice the track against the backing that I've made, and that's a good idea for me. Yeah, because I'm not in a band anymore, and you know, I need to practice. Everybody does, don't they? Well, some don't. We've already covered the light blue wire that's on the digital in, And you can see that there's an RS232C there, and there's a parallel for the control I/O, which we're not using either of those, but there's also a remote in, an ECSS2 with a grey wire coming out, and that shoots off to the right to that little controller that we looked at before, that can control the Tascam itself. Further to the right is the mains, and that's about it for the rack itself internally, so to speak. If you go right down to the bottom of the diagram, you'll see on the right hand side of Helix Control there's two of those Nectar pedals, which I have, and those have been plugged into the Helix Control with two pink wires. You can see them there. They'll be used for controlling various parameters depending what I program in. On the right hand side you've also got the sort of key to what everything does, and that's the diagram. Yeah, it took me about I don't know, a couple of hours to draw it and set it all up. Well, that's the reason I sat there and drew all that mess up on the computer, so that at least you've got some idea of where it was, and if you need to change anything, even that helps. A bit later on, if I do change things, I'm not so sure about this, well, we'll see. I can come and change everything, and then we can end up with a diagram down below of what this rack's about. But it's only just an idea to show people what I did, or what didn't work for me, or what did work for me, and so on and so forth. It's a very different wiring setup than the rack as it came out. You saw how many wires, well, I hope you did. You saw how many wires there were. I mean, it was a bit of a rat's nest. Okay, well, the first problem is to get the wireless output around to that front guitar in connector. Now you might say, oh, that's going to be a bit of a problem, the rack's full. Well, it is a bit of a problem if you just go down the normal routes. Let's whip around to the front of the rack and just take a quick look at what the real problem is. Well, here we go. Right there is the guitar in. Yeah, what a place to put it. Nothing on the back that's an equivalent. I thought that was a real pain in the neck, a real pain. But if we take a look at the rack, it generates a problem. You can see quite clearly that there's no gaps to put any 1/4 inch cable from round the back. What a pain in the neck. However, I do have a result for this. Well, I think I do. You can buy specialised cables. Now you can buy a cable that's flat, but I opted to get one of these. Well, it is a proper, decent, they say, audio cable, and it is actually made for guitar, and it's made by Linkin Park. Yeah, the band must have split up and decided to make cables. Yeah, Linkin Park, come on. If you look at this, it is a problem, but it isn't a problem, because I've actually got a few places that the thickness of this cable can actually come through from the back into the front. And that's the thing, that'll get me beyond the problem. There you go. You can probably see, maybe you can see, there's a little hole down there now that I could put a wire in. And that's my solution on this type of rack. This is a Gator rack, by the way, one of those plastic type of things. But a fair number of years. I think I might have updated this rack once throughout the years, or not. In any case, that little piece of aluminium at the bottom is tappable in. You can see on the screen the before, where it was sort of cut away at the bottom, and the after, where you can see I've pushed it in so I can get my piece of wire through. Yeah, but you will need a small, thinner piece of wire, and yeah, it's on Amazon. Well, there's a neat solution to what I think is a right mistake by the Helix boys, and that is only having a guitar in on the front of the rack as opposed to on the back of the rack as well. I mean, how hard is it? It would have taken not a lot to do that. In fact, you could fit one yourself. There's enough room to do that. But I didn't really want to butcher it, so I thought to myself, yeah, we'll work this way. What's up next? Well, I've got a little MimiQ pedal to connect in. And I've also got these 3 wires here, which I won't be fitting right now. These will be fitted when I get out to the studio, because there's no real point in just dangling a load of wires around. It's just a question of plugging them in and they should work. And I'll confirm which part of the amp in we ended up using it with. So that's basically that side of the wiring done. But this side, let me go and get the MimiQ pedal and then we can go a bit further. So here it is, the MimiQ. Yeah, it even looks the same but a bit smaller. I wish it was that small, but unfortunately it isn't. It's this small. So if we drop this down a little minute or two, we can see it's got to go in there somewhere. Now I could actually stick it on the side right there, out of the way. Have a power supply in there somewhere, probably down out the way, and power it from the mains. That works too. Yeah, you'd want to do that. So there it is fitted. It's all in place. It's out of the way. It doesn't stick out the rack. The cables are long enough. What more can I say? And they're all angled cables, which makes it quite nice, especially when you're around the back here. And I can get at this, and what I can do is put a little supply in there that's powered from the top. I will do that a bit later. I'll probably do it on camera, and it will be connected in here, and that unit will just work from the mains just like everything else. And of course, with it being on loops, I can turn it in or out at will. What I do have to do is look at the DIF out of the Helix and into the digital Tascam, the digital in on the Tascam, which is a coaxial connection. Okay, well here we are on the cable for the coaxial connection, or the SPDIF as some people call it. And you normally have a sort of cable that's made for the job. I believe that last cable was about 1 metre long. It's a bit long for what I wanted. I wanted a really short one, about this sort of long, but they didn't have it. So I went and dug a bit further and I ended up with cable number 2. Now things about this cable, here we go, all Amazon by the way. Not that I'm a fan of Amazon, I'm not. But this says, oh, it's a ½ metre it says, oh, it's a bit longer than a foot. It's tip to tip though. Digital audio coax cable, yeah, 0.5 metres from Road 30 somewhere. Oh, C2G, a brand of legend, or is it legend? It's one of them. The important thing though is this is actually all marked up, and you can tell it's a really different sort of cable. Now listen, it's not rocket science, right? It's all pretty straightforward. Here's my piece of cable, as you see. Digital audio. It's designed for the job. Might be slightly long, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. I can't shorten it. It seems I can't really shorten any of these, so you get what you get. Good hunting in the 6-inch cable that I could never find. Anyway, it's got to come out of the Helix. So it's going to be coming out of that one there at the bottom, and it's going to wrap around and go into that one there. And as you can see, it's not perfect. I'd liked an angle on this bit. Couldn't find one. Maybe I'll look for a converter and then it'll come right angled out and everything will be good. But if not, in my case it doesn't really matter, but it might in yours. Remember, if you're going to be putting a back on this unit, it's not the best answer. You really want a 90-degree sort of angle. Okay, well I guess anybody could do that, couldn't they? But the real trick is, make sure you've got the right cable. If you get those really cheap nasty things, trust me, you'll end up with trouble and or interference and or X, Y or Z. It'll be anything except it works right. Now I've only got one more cable that we could plug into this. I'm not going to actually plug it in, but I'm just going to talk about the cable. I know it sounds stupid, but the cables are half the secret in trying to get a proper job. Yeah, you put them in, you'll never have to pull them out again. Sounds like common sense to me, but you'll be surprised how many people don't have any common sense. Yeah, it's just a fact of life. So what am I going to mention? I'm going to talk about MIDI cables. A MIDI cable, yeah, there's one here. Just bought this just the other day. And there's a good reason I bought this one. First of all, if you look on the back of this thing, there's loads of information about it. Yeah, loads of information about how it's constructed and how it's made and how it's this and how it's that. Well, it's important, but it's not that important. This is only 3 feet long, or 1 meter. Actually 3 foot 3 inches, or 1 meter long. And it's just perfect for what I want, because I just want it to come out the back of this, in here, and whip down to the amplifier that will be underneath it, which is less than a meter. So you've got a little bit of spare to play with. But the most important thing about this isn't the stuff on the back. Well, almost. It's these little words on the top, and it says here, Roll and MIDI cable, lifetime guarantee. I just love that. Lifetime guarantee. Yeah, it costs you a few quid more, but it's lifetime guarantee. As long as you can prove, you know, where it's from, which I can, Amazon, and as long as you've got your receipt, which it will be, it'll be in my purchasing stuff. When it does screw up, I can give it them back and get a new one. Honestly, that in itself, with cables that are going to go in here, it's a godsend. You see, when you cut corners, as I have done many times, you don't end up with the necessary best answers. You don't end up with what you really wanted. And MIDI cables are a good example. Here's one that I used in that other system. And it says MIDI cable on it, it's stamped on it. So I was good enough to buy a cable that was supposedly specified as a MIDI cable. It's printed on it. But you can never be sure on these cheap cables. Because, well, our Far East friends don't always tell the truth. Unfortunately, they don't. I've been on the receiving end of that sort of thing on quite a number of occasions up to now, and they're never regretful later. You try to get your money, but yeah, you'll send it back to China, they say. This one happened to work, but I've had loads of them that didn't work, and they weren't even wired up right. They were DIN plugs. Yeah, DIN plugs, and not MIDI cables, and that can create all sorts of problems. On these cables, these Roland ones, honestly, it's perfect. You look at the spec, well, you go and look at one yourself, you'll find them on the internet. Pure oxygen free copper conductor, oxygen free copper spiral shielding, and manufacturer 2036, well, that's his address. How funny is that? Well, you'll know what I mean. That's enough about cables, and that's my MIDI cable that is going to be used in the rack, or on the rack. No, it's in the rack, and it comes out there and goes off down to the amp. Well, what's next in this fabulous piece of equipment? Well, as far as the cables go, we looked at this. It's on the screen right now, so you can see that all other cables that we might talk about actually leave the rig and go somewhere else. So there's no point in fitting them while we're on the bench in here. Yeah, so what we do want to do, however, is to do a couple of little tests just to make sure things are going where we want them to go. Yeah, and that's easy enough if you've got a pair of headphones, really. A set of headphones will help you, no end. It'll help me too. So I'm just going to turn it round now and we'll have a quick look at the front side of things. Well, as you can see from the front here, down here where I am, it's a bit of a beast, isn't it? It probably won't do as much as some people like, but they'll get bigger racks and things like that. You can have them 4 standing things. You want to be an idiot. I think they've gone a bit these days, but yeah, this one's okay for me. And when all said and done, it's my rack, so shut up. And there it is, powered on. Okay, I haven't got everything plugged in yet, but we've got a few checks and things to make sure it work. And using some headphones will help. Yeah, I can't wait. Yes, I've got the headphones plugged into this bottom unit, the Tascam, and I've got the cable just on the direct connection rather than going through all the back and the wireless and the rest of it. So if I touch this, if I've got audio into this, I should be able to hear it. Listen careful. There it is. And if I turn this off from being on record mode, you'll find it's gone. It's perfect for me. It might not be perfect for you, but that's the way life is. I'm all happy with that. So, well, where are we at now? I'm at a point where it's ready to be taken outside and connected up to an amp and the desk and all the other things that are out there, and then we can get down to doing some programming and the rest of it. Yeah, because it's very difficult to do it all in here because you need it plugged in to be able to do all the rest. So I'll get the PC out and we can do it in the comfort of the studio. Well, that's going to be in the next video, I'm afraid, because this video is getting longer and longer and longer. The singular thing I've got to do on this now is connect the MimiQ power supply up to this Samsung at the top. Listen, this is not rocket science. I'm not going to go zooming in for 10 hours showing you how to plug a power supply in. No, you get the idea. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to have a look at TonyMcKenzie.com if you can get a chance to go around and have a look at that. Maybe I'll update it one of these days. I say that every time. And yeah, one last thing. Now I'm back at work in the daytime on a 5-day week, so to speak, and you may not be if you're in America, but I want you to think about being extra careful out there and stay away from the madding crowd, so to speak, because every time it gets spread, that virus, you go further down in the lockdown stuff, and it's going to cost jobs. It's going to lose companies, it's going to do all the things that you and I don't want it to do. And if you do want it to do that, well, you're a bit of a loony, right? You shouldn't be on here. But I'd stress, stay safe, stay away from it all, be very careful what you do, and do wear them masks. They do make a difference. If not to you, they do make a difference to other people. Like the old gits like me. Yeah, you do want some more videos, don't you? But seriously, stay safe, and the next video will be coming, well, probably it'll take me a week to do it. Now get out of here.